Welcome to Cinemafile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemafilepod.com. Through the lens of his own recovery, filmmaker Benjamin Flaherty's character-driven look inside the billion-dollar addiction treatment industry, where clients are bought and sold for their insurance policies and ushered into a system designed to keep them sick. What begins as an investigation of a street-level scam explodes to uncover collusion at the highest levels of government, as well as insurance companies, rehab centers, a network of doctors who are involved in all of this. It is a wide-ranging look at something that I think most of us were hoping would help people. Just an absolutely compelling film, truly revelatory, not only on a personal level, but also on the business of addiction. Wow. Shuffle's the name of the film. We're joined today by the director, Benjamin Flaherty. Benjamin, welcome to Cinemafile.
Michael, thanks for having me.
I am so honored to have you on because I think this is a brave film in a lot of ways, not only for yourself, but for the people in the film. We get to spend a lot of time with people going through a lot of trauma, a lot of different issues that are coming into their lives. We'll get into that, but tell me a little bit about what made you decide to pick up a camera and want to document the variety of stories, but also your own story.
Well, I'll tell you from the beginning. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me and for having us in this opportunity to talk about Shuffle. I can tell you from the get-go, I was not interested in telling my own story. That addition to the film came much later on. I was newly sober myself when I stumbled across this issue, if you want to call it that, maybe a few months sober. So I'd recently had a very positive experience in treatment. And a friend told me a story who had gotten sober in Florida and told me a short story about how people were being recruited into sober homes because they had good insurance. I was shocked and confused and really fascinated for a lot of reasons because I was living in a sober home at the time, and that doesn't have anything to do with your insurance. So there was a bit of a disconnect. And so I was just really fascinated. I was also horrified, something that to me was sacred, all of a sudden now seemed very transactional. And it really sort of worried me in a way that I don't know that I was able to articulate, like in my bones, you know, because now I have the words for it, which is that if you're going to take advantage of a population of people, this is a fantastic population of people to take advantage of. Let's just be honest. It is. And I say that being a member of that population, like that moment, the vulnerability there, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the immediate interest in picking up a camera was, I've been making films of various sorts for years, whether it's commercials or PSAs, and I made a few longer films in my early 20s. But I was coming out of advertising. I was freshly sober. I wasn't really looking to make a film, but I did want to go talk to people. Like I thought, I read a lot of the media and the articles that had been written on the issue. And while they were great, a lot of them were surface level because it's a difficult world to get inside of. And I thought, well, I'm a member of this world, whether I like it or not. And these are my people. I speak this language. Maybe I can have a conversation that would happen on different terms. You know what I mean? And so that's really what it started as. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go do this, I should bring a camera with me. But there wasn't a lot of much more forethought than that put into this, which was I wanted to go learn more. I was incredibly fascinated. I had the time to do it, and I thought that I could meet some people that might be less inclined to meet, say, a journalist, for example.
Well, I definitely want to talk about the people that we meet in the film. Um, they're compelling stories, and I hate to use the word tragic, but it's there's just whatever. We'll get into it. But at what point did you realize this, the business side of addiction? You had mentioned you really didn't have a context for it before, but in
No.
the making of the film, as you were beginning to document these stories, Was it immediately apparent to you that that
No.
was what was going on? Okay, well, let's
No,
talk
I
a little
mean,
bit
it,
about
it
that.
was immediately apparent in the sense that I had this like you know that moment in films where like a character realizes something that he doesn't yet know, and that there's like this flash edit of everything in fast forward, and that it's real quick. It was like that. Like I couldn't reach out and grab it really. It was there. I couldn't draw. Maybe I could draw it for you. That's what I could have done. I couldn't have explained it. I couldn't get words to it, but I knew that it wasn't just a couple of people who came up with this scheme to do this. You know
Right,
what I mean? It
right.
wasn't. The tentacles of this were long and winding, and it got more shocking to me as I learned. There was a huge learning curve. Like I really, so while I had a feeling for it, I couldn't articulate it. And it took me a long time, I think, to fully get it. And I do remember the moment where it like I think it hit me. And then I was like, oh, well, obviously. And now and still I still learn things. I mean, I'm learning things like some of the loopholes and some of the policy. I mean, there's little nuggets of information that I continue to learn that still shock me. But I think when I do remember grasping the full scope of it. And it's a hard thing to say because I know that the system is designed with good intentions. But it's hard to believe that the system that got designed, that anyone thought that it would actually, you know, help people get better. It's sort of, and I'm
Right.
not an economist, you know what I mean? But when
Right.
I, when I, and that's what shocked me is, and that's another reason I wanted to make the film is because I'm not an economist. I went to a college that was founded by a Buddhist monk and Allen Ginsberg. Like we didn't have chairs. You know what I'm saying? Like we sat on the floor. So like I'm not coming from a institution of higher learning. I wasn't applying necessarily those principles. That's not to say that I'm not a critical thinker and all of those things, but
Right.
but it wasn't that lens that I was interested in. I felt more like a plumber. You know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
got under the sink and I dug around and I was like, whoa, like it's a mess down here. And if it's a mess to me, someone who's inexperienced in this field, certainly not trained. I'm not an economist. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not someone who creates policy. But as the everyday person looking at all of this, I have to say that it would seem that there's a much better way to make a system that would actually help people. The credit of the people in the film, the participants in the film, and their bravery and willingness to expose themselves and their stories, we can see how ineffective this is for some people. And that's not to say it's not effective for everybody. Again, it's because I had such a positive experience in treatment that I wanted to make this film. Like I want to protect that experience for other people. But yeah, this isn't my film. It's their film. And to bring it back to what I said, it was only much later in the editing process that it was decided I should start telling some of my story. For me, it felt like how can I put them out there and not share as well? But also, so much of the film was my experience of making it, of them as people. And I needed to include myself in that if I was going to give the audience sort of a fair chance of understanding the dynamics between us. That it wasn't, at times, sure, it was filmmaker and subject, but more often it was two people on a similar level, trying to negotiate like what that looks like from two different points of view.
Well, you're describing what makes the film so compelling. The name of the film is Shuffle. Because of we are personally invested in the fate of the people that we meet through all their travails and their stumbles and their accomplishments, their moving forward their lives, and all of it makes it a very compelling film. But I'll say the quiet part out loud. I'm from a government background. I worked in politics for many years. I would lock every member of Congress into a room and make them watch this. And if they can come out of there and say to the cameras, "Oh no, we're fine with this system," then they're the problem.
Well, thank you for that. And you're actually the second person who has said those exact words. Like everyone in Congress needs to see this. Like, and I,
Yes,
I agree with you. I think for a lot of reasons. I think again because I want to believe that all these policies are well intended. It's also the policymakers are at such a distance from the effect of their policies. You know what I mean? From the people
yes,
on the other end of that it's hard for them to understand. You
right.
know?
But they're not that far away from the people who fund their campaigns.
Yes.
And if the people who fund their campaigns are telling them you need to vote for this mess, this scam, then a lot of people will. Now, did they know it was a scam? No. I'm going to assume the better angels in all of
Sure,
this.
sure.
I can't imagine that anyone would willingly vote for a system that essentially makes people into profit centers the way that this one does.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I'll give them the benefit of almost all of them the benefit of the doubt, but somebody knew.
I agree with you. I think this was completely well intended. Certainly people have figured it out at this point, obviously. But what's interesting about it is that, it's the flip side, and you can use other laws you can talk about other laws as a similar example, and even related to this issue. So, sober homes, for example, fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, which both of those laws prevent the inspection and regulation of sober homes. So here's two laws designed to protect a portion of the population, but when that's extended to include this portion of the population, it allows a fraud to occur. So how do we make room in that law? And in fact, there's a gentleman that we've been working with who managed to do this in Kentucky and pass a bill, a House bill, that creates room while keeping the necessary protections of those laws in place, but makes room to also now regulate and inspect a sober home for the safety of that population too. So it's possible.
Well, we are increasingly living in a society and in an economic system that is pernicious in going after the most vulnerable people in that society. And
Yeah.
we have to do something about that. And again, I'm only on my soapbox because Shuffle is as good an example of in real time and in real ways, laying it out in the ways that it works. The people like Corey and AJ and the people that are in the film know the system and they have no filter in terms of telling us how it is, and what it's done to them and what it's done to millions of other people.
Yeah.
Because you have a feeder system of opioids at one end, the Sackler family,
Yeah.
and then throughout the process, it feels like I want to know if the Sacklers are invested in this system. I want to know who's
Right.
investing their money into this, knowing full well what's going on. And I am dancing around it. I don't want to get into the particulars. I want people to see Shuffle
Yeah.
because the shock of it is what is most the thing that sticks with me right now. Not only getting to know the people, but the
Yeah.
shock of this, that this is actually happening in plain sight, in daylight,
Yeah.
is crazy to me.
It's crazy and I'm glad. I mean, outrage was my first reaction, and that was something that I was trying to carry through into the film and to put it together in a way that would allow people to come to that same outrage themselves without being told they had to, which is sometimes a fine line, I think, in any sort of media or conversation. Yeah. The outrage. Uh,
The outrage. Let's shift our focus a little bit here to what I just brought up was getting to know Corey.
mm,
The people, let's talk about the people in the film
yeah.
because they're compelling stories.
It took a long time. We spent 8 months, or I spent 8 months interviewing a lot of moms, a lot of people who were involved or around the periphery of it. But the nature of being in a treatment facility and being involved in this means that you're largely out of touch. Many people don't have cell phones. The treatment centers don't allow you to have phones. So it took some time to get to these folks. And a lot of this was done online, and I would try and meet people. And finally, I started going to Florida, South Florida, and I would spend a week at a time down there. And sometimes I would meet no one, or everyone would cancel and not show up, which was a common thing. But I just kind of kept after it, and finally, one thing led to another, and I met Corey through, actually, it was a photograph. I was looking for information on another young woman, and Corey was in it. And so as a friend of hers, I thought he could tell me about her. And he had a lot more to tell me than that, it turns out. But it took a while for Corey and I to build trust. And I think it's interesting to think about because this is a very transactional fraud, right? And so these kids, and certainly Corey, who's a hustler himself, and he's been on both sides of this, and he's used to being part of that transaction, and he expects things to be transactional. So even with us, it's like, well, you're filming me. What do I get from this?
Yeah.
Like, what's the transaction here? And I'm like, there isn't one. I had to break through that with each individual. Like, this isn't transactional. Like, we're going to do this differently. And that's the connection. That's what was really powerful.
Yeah.
It was like, no, this is just about us and
Yeah.
you and us. And like, finally, they're like, oh, okay, but they don't have anyone in their lives who's doing that with them. And
Right.
when they're caught in this, you know what I mean? They don't have anyone listening for the sake of listening or hearing for the sake of hearing or sharing for the sake of it. So it was very sort of a broken down, fundamental, basic process of learning how to like trust each other in the way, like meeting them where they're at, I should say, is what it required. A willingness to do that. And their willingness to be met too, because Corey told me, he's like, I wasn't going to meet you at first. Like I was just going to bail on you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad, so baby steps. Nicole was a little bit more, like she just wanted to talk the moment I met her. You know what I mean? Like she had a lot to say. And Nicole is interesting in the fact that she had been experiencing this for a long time, for years. She didn't understand what was happening to her until I explained it to her.
Oh, wow.
Like Corey
Wow.
knew and was fully complicit almost in this. Nicole didn't get it. She just thought she was a failure. And that's just a massive tragedy, and one that's worth pointing out is that, the harms of this and the dangers of this lean into the larger narratives that people tell themselves and we tell ourselves about addiction, which is that addicts are failures. They don't try hard enough. All
Right.
of those things. Well, this fraud happens to work perfectly with that. It's like, yep, there they go again. And it's not necessarily that they're trying hard, it's that the system isn't set up to do much for them. And so that was really interesting. And Corey and Nicole, I met very close together. But previous to them, I met Daniel and his mother. And they were the first people who really were actively involved. So, when I went, because I think Daniel had only been home from his experience in California for about 9 days when I finally met him. But him and his mother and myself, we spent about 6 months before she was willing to actually introduce me to him. And I found her by scouring Google ads, Google reviews, because the reviews on these places, a lot of them are BS. They're paid for. Client cigarettes or whatever, write a nice review. And they delete the negative ones. So you really have to work hard. So one night of long scrolling, I finally found a review warning other parents about this place. And I reached out to her, and she's just a wonderful person. I can't say enough about her. I'm going to see her next weekend at the premiere in New York. She comes out and participates with us in the Q&As and stuff. She's an amazing person. But yeah, her story and Daniel's story in the film was one of the first ones I heard. It was shocking at the time. It was even more shocking later for a lot of reasons because Daniel's experience was very compressed compared to the others. Like the others were talking multiple years, 6, 7 years. Daniel's was a year and a half, but whoa, was he put through the ringer in that year and a half. And his experience was such a great example of the multiple revenue streams involved in this. Like you could really look at it from this business angle with his story. And so his was really, really interesting. And I don't want to give too much away in the film. Another thing that is interesting about him, and that actually very early in the production process illuminated how much bigger this was, about a week after I met Daniel and spent time with Daniel, I was that was in Kentucky. I was in Akron, Ohio, and I met a young woman who was in a very, very rough shape. So for starters, Daniel, who at the time was doing well, things were looking great, had his stuff together. And then there was this other woman who was in very rough shape. I showed her a picture of Daniel and she recognized him because they both had been flown from treatment centers in Michigan or to a outpatient facility in California. So this isn't random, right? There's obviously some sort of network. And it just blew my mind that she knew him. And they're in very different places today, which is also shocking to me. Like if you'd asked me to put money on make a prediction, I would have made a far different one. And so the fraud here, when you use the word fraud, it's hard because we often think of fraud as just a financial crime. And this particular fraud has such real world life or death consequences for people that it's obviously it's pretty alarming.
And yes, it is alarming. It is heartbreaking. There are, as I said before, there are stories of resilience and triumph. But this is the perfect crime because the victims believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The victims of this believe what's happening to them is their fate, is their responsibility, it is their
Yeah.
whatever. And it almost eliminates any fear on the part of the people perpetrating this crime to be worried about it, to be worried that they may be held accountable.
Yeah, it's genius. I've said that. I agree with you. It's fascinatingly wicked, you know.
Right.
The people who I've met who are good at this, manipulating the system. There's a few people who aren't in the film for a lot of great reasons. One of the most criminally minded people I've ever met. And I say that as a compliment and not in a crass way. It's just
Yeah.
his brain. He didn't decide this. His brain just works differently. He explained it to me, like from when he was 7. He will look at a system and what he sees is how to manipulate that system. That's all he sees. And he's so good at it that I was riveted. What's interesting is some of the people, I'll tell you an interesting story about him. He now works for a private fraud investigator
Okay.
investigating this
Thank
because
you.
who better,
Yes.
you know? And he's fantastic at it,
Yeah.
So
Benjamin, I just one more time want to say to our audience, I know I'm being cryptic. I believe that Benjamin is somewhat cryptic in describing all of these things, but trust me when I tell you that this is a shocking and it will stay with you. This is a system that is not broken because I think it's working as expected. And the fact that it is expected to work this way should shock the conscience of anyone who watches it. I've got to believe there are some very, very, very wealthy people who should be running a little bit. They should be concerned
I
because
think so.
God help us, this has to get out.
Yeah,
Whatever that happens to the film, again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is
yeah.
just too much.
It's one of the most brutal bait and switches I've ever seen. Let's put it that way. You know,
It's heartless
um,
beyond words. Oh
it's
God.
it's important to say it's also a testament to the resilience of human beings too, because this film is, yeah, it's dark and it's heavy at times, but it's certainly not without hope and levity.
Right.
And I was privileged to see people be a part of people, witness people getting better
Yeah.
uh, through their own volition, and there's really nothing more
Yeah.
beautiful than that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was
Well,
a privilege.
before I let you go, Walk Don't Run to Sea Shuffle. Benjamin, it opens in New York this week, or when is it opening?
January 16th through the
I'm sorry.
22nd at DCTV in New York City.
John Alpert, God bless him, one of the great people in the field of documentary
Indeed.
films and in presentation. He makes sure great films get seen. Thank you for that, John Alpert.
Yeah, indeed.
When can we expect to see you out here in Los Angeles?
We will be in Los Angeles January 27th and 28th at the Lemley. 27th is at the Monica Lemley, and 28th is at the NoHo Lemley in North Hollywood.
Oh, perfect.
We'll be
Good.
posting about that on Stop the Shuffle on Instagram and .com.
It should have its, listen, I'm serious. I'm not kidding. This should have its own channel, its own cable channel, because people should watch this that often, just in
Well,
case they're wondering about
yeah,
how things work and how
yeah,
money, private equity. I'm going to keep coming back to, you're not the first person to introduce me to the evils of private equity in terms of
yeah,
the work that they've done. It's all about money. It's about nothing else. It's about nothing but making money.
yeah,
So we should all be on the lookout for ways in which we can corral that impulse in the
yeah.
marketplace. My hat's off to you, man. I'm so glad that in your own life travels as well as your skill as a filmmaker, you have brought us Shuffle. So thank you so very much.
Michael, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much.
We've been speaking with Benjamin Flaherty. He is the director and many other hats he wore in this film, Shuffle, cinematographer, all kinds of things that he's responsible for. All the best. I look forward to another conversation whenever and however that happens. Thank you so very much.
Thanks again, Mike.
You have been listening to Cinemafile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemafilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemafile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.